this piece of brass. It might look like something you'd find in your grandpa's desk. An antique. A curiosity. But you are looking at one of the most disruptive, world-shattering pieces of technology ever created. This isn't just a compass. It's the ancestor of the GPS in your phone, the architect of our global economy, and a weapon that redrew the map of the world. And it holds a secret. From the moment it was first trusted, this device was a liar. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Today, we conduct an autopsy. Not on a person, but on a moment. The moment this compass, warm from a lantern's glow, resting in a salt-sprayed cabin, gave a captain the courage to turn his ship away from the shore and sail into the terrifying, beautiful, and utterly unknown void. Picture it, the world before this. For thousands of years, to sail was to hug the coast, to keep the land in sight. Your world was defined by the shoreline. The open ocean was not a highway, it was a death sentence. A place of monsters, myths, and a horrifying certainty that if you lost sight of land, you were already a ghost. You navigated by the sun, the stars, the landmarks you knew. But what happens when the clouds roll in? What happens when a storm pushes you out into the endless, featureless blue? You are lost, utterly. And your fate is in the hands of the gods. And then, this came along. A tiny, quivering, magnetized needle balanced on a pin, sealed under glass. And it whispered a promise no god ever had. No matter how lost you are, no matter how dark the sky, I will always show you the way home. It was a miracle, a revolution in a brass case. So let's crack open the case file. The artifact before us spans centuries, from the 15th to the 19th. We have a brass casing. Why brass? Because brass is non-ferrous. It doesn't have iron, so it won't tempt the magnetic needle, it won't pull it from its sacred duty. We have a glass lid, etched with the lines of direction, protecting the delicate instrument from the corrosive salt spray that devoured everything else on a ship: wood, iron, cloth, even men. Inside, a pivot, worn smooth from a million tiny adjustments from the constant rocking of a vessel at sea. And at its heart, a slender piece of magnetized iron, the needle. A captured mystery. A piece of metal that somehow, impossibly, had been taught to feel the invisible lines of force that wrap our entire planet. It was technology so profound, it felt like magic. And for the men on that ship, it was. But who were these men? Why were they willing to bet their lives on this little piece of trembling metal? The human stakes were astronomical. Think of the merchants in Venice or Lisbon, pouring their family fortunes into a single ship, desperate to find a faster route to the Spice Islands of the East. Spices were not just for flavor, they were wealth. Pepper, cloves, nutmeg, they were worth more than gold. This compass wasn't just a tool, it was a key to a vault. It was the difference between generational wealth and total ruin. Think of the navies, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the English. This compass became a weapon. It allowed them to project force across thousands of miles of ocean with a precision that was previously unthinkable. An enemy fleet couldn't just disappear into the fog anymore. Armies could be delivered to distant continents. An empire's might was no longer confined by its borders, but by the reach of its ships, and every one of those ships had a compass at its heart. To control the compass was to control the seas, and to control the seas was to control the world. And then there were the explorers. The men driven by faith, by fame, by a burning curiosity to see what was over the horizon. But let's be brutally honest, they were also colonizers. And as they followed that needle, they weren't just discovering, they were claiming. They drew lines on maps where no lines existed before. And in the drawing of a single line, a coastline, a river, a new border, the maps that had existed for thousands of years in the minds and cultures of the people already living there, were overwritten, erased. When that needle found a new shore, it anchored that shore to a distant power. And for the people on that shore, the world would never be the same. So you see, the compass didn't just enable navigation. It enabled a new way of thinking about the world. It enabled route making on a global scale. It turned the terrifying, chaotic ocean into a grid, a series of potential highways. Suddenly, you could assess risk in a new way. You could calculate the odds of a voyage. The path from Lisbon to Calcutta was no longer a mythical quest. It was a business plan. To point the needle was to vote for a voyage. To name a port on a chart was to claim a new market. And to chart an entire coast was to claim its future. The compass translated uncertain space into navigable space. It took the terror of the unknown and turned it into a manageable problem of logistics and will. And every line drawn on that map beneath the compass lid, that wasn't just geography. It was a social contract written by the winners. That map is a political document. It asks questions we rarely think about. Who gets to draw the lines? Who decides which routes are important? When a trade route is established, who gets rich? It's the ship owner, the crown, the investors back in Europe. And who pays the price? The sailor who might die of scurvy. The local merchant whose business is destroyed by foreign goods. The community whose lands are taken, whose resources are extracted. And who disappears? When a route is established, it means other routes are abandoned. Entire economies, entire ways of life, can vanish when the needle points in a different direction. Every single backward glance toward a coastline, by a sailor charting a new course, redraws the future for someone else. And the compass was the silent witness, the enabler of it all. Now, we have to talk about the lie. The terrible secret at the heart of the compass. You see, the needle doesn't actually point to the North Pole. Not the true geographic North Pole, the spot the Earth spins on. It points to the magnetic North Pole, a different location deep in the Canadian Arctic that is constantly, slowly wandering. That difference between true north and magnetic north is an angle called declination. And that angle changes depending on where you are on the surface of the Earth. In some places, it's a few degrees. In others, it can be 20, 30, even 40 degrees. If you followed that compass needle blindly, thinking it was leading you true north, you would end up hundreds, even thousands of miles off course. You would end up shipwrecked or starving in the middle of the ocean. So this miracle device, this key to the world, was fundamentally flawed. It was a liar. So how did they do it? How did they build empires on a foundation of a lie? This is where human genius comes in. This is the art of navigation. They couldn't fix the compass, so they learned to account for its deception. Navigators became obsessed with declination. They created complex, beautiful charts called portallon charts, covered in a web of lines radiating from compass roses, which tried to map out how the declination changed across the sea. Every time a ship made landfall, the navigator would take careful measurements of the stars, compare them to his compass, and make a new note, a new correction. They were, in effect, building the first global, crowdsourced database. A massive, centuries-long project to map the Earth's magnetic field, all recorded by hand in logbooks and on charts. They sailed with one eye on the compass and the other on the heavens. They used the sun at noon to find their latitude, their position north or south. They used the North Star, Polaris. The compass gave them their heading, their direction. The stars gave them their position. The two worked together in a delicate, brilliant dance. It was a system built on trust and skepticism. You trusted the needle to point in a consistent direction, but you never fully trusted that direction was true. You had to constantly check its work against the unmoving truth of the cosmos. This relationship, this tension between technology and belief, between a flawed tool and the unchanging stars, that's what really created the world we inhabit. It shows us a profound truth. Belief steers invention, profit shapes belief, and power, the power to fund the voyages and draw the final map, writes the routes we eventually come to call fate. And the memory of that struggle, of that certainty built from uncertainty, it hums in this brass and glass. The past is not quiet here. You can almost feel the silent calculations of 100 navigators, their minds racing to correct for the subtle, constant declination of that needle. The world wasn't just discovered. It was interpreted. It was argued with. It was wrestled into submission, one degree of declination at a time. And this process has never stopped. In fact, you're a part of it right now. The verdict comes in like a beam from a lighthouse, cutting through the fog of history. The system is the same. The tools are just smaller and faster. We still navigate with invisible compasses. You just call it GPS. You call it Google Maps. You call it an algorithm. Every time your phone tells you the fastest route to work, a choice is being made for you. A calculation of direction and efficiency. But that choice reveals who controls the map. Who wrote the algorithm? What data is it using? Is it prioritizing the fastest route for you, or the most fuel efficient? Is it routing you around a wealthy neighborhood to keep traffic down? Is it sending you through a poor neighborhood because it's been designated a major thoroughfare? We are told where to go, and we trust the needle on our screen, rarely, if ever, asking why it's pointing that way. We've outsourced the struggle with declination to a black box. We trust, but we no longer verify against the stars. We have a compass that is more precise than ever, but we've forgotten how to question if it's telling us the truth about where we should be going. The legacy of this brass compass lives everywhere. It lives in the straight-line property boundaries of your neighborhood. It lives in the gerrymandered districts that decide elections. It lives in the global shipping lanes that put the food on your table and the phone in your hand. Our entire shared sense of place was built on the logic this instrument created. Understanding its past, understanding its inherent flaws, and the human systems built to correct them helps us ask the most important question of all. Who gets to decide where we go next? To navigate has always been to authorize power. To map has always been to allocate a sense of belonging, to decide who is on the inside of the line and who is on the outside. In our time, the memory of that brass dial travels through fiber optic cables and bounces off satellites. The ghost of the age of discovery travels with us. Every algorithmic route doesn't just ask where to go. It asks who has the right to choose the path, who profits from that choice, and whose route is being ignored or erased in the process. We've traded a compass that lied by a few degrees for one whose biases are coded in a language most of us will never see or understand. The challenge remains the same, to be a savvy navigator in a world where the map is always being drawn by someone else. The verdict, then, is simple. Direction is governance. The power to point the way is the power to rule. From a magnetized needle floating in a bowl of water to a global network of satellites, the technology has changed, but its function has not. It is to turn the chaos of the world into an ordered set of routes that create winners and losers, empires and colonies, highways and dead ends. The world becomes a set of accessible paths, but also a contest over what paths are allowed and who benefits. That is the true, enduring legacy of this simple, beautiful, and profoundly dangerous object. Its story demands witnesses who will look at their own maps, the digital maps on their screens, and question their authority. If this compass could speak, it wouldn't just tell tales of storms and distant shores. It would ask us, very simply, who drew your map? And are you sure it's leading you where you truly want to go? That is the question at the heart of the archive. Now, if you thought the compass changed the world by conquering space, wait until you learn about the device that allowed us to conquer time itself, the marine chronometer. That one video will change how you think about every clock in your house. I've put it on the screen for you right now. It's an incredible story. And before you go, answer this question in the comments. What's one place your digital map has led you that you never would have found on your own? I read every single comment. We unpack the hidden history of everyday objects like this every single day on Archives of Humanity. If you want to see the world differently, to decode the history hidden in plain sight, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the investigation.